Happy Friday, everyone! So tonight it is Finish It Friday, which is every first Friday of the new month. We stop what we're working on and we take out a project that we haven't worked on in a while and see if we can get an hour further along with that project. And tonight we're going to work on my leader and ender quilt. So I will talk about that in a bit, but thank you guys for joining me here tonight. My name is Alyssa Thomas from Penguin and Fish, where we make cute embroidery kits for the beginning crafter. And I'm here every weeknight at 8:30 p.m. Central Time, and it's a time that we can relax and craft together. I'm here for about an hour, and I work on projects from beginning to end, so you can be part of the whole process along the way. And tonight, Finish It Friday, we are going to work on the leader and ender quilt. I have 9 blocks like this. I'll show them to you. And this is from old shirts, old sheets, and it's actually done with my leaders and enders. So when you're sewing, a lot of times you might see people with like little frizzled bits of fabric. So this is just to start and end whatever they're sewing. It's so you don't have lots of strings everywhere. You just put a little piece of fabric at the beginning before you stitch your main thing, and then a little bit at the end, and it'll kind of hold your floss for you. So typically everyone will do just like these scatter ones where they put lots over and over and over again, lots of stitches. But what I've been doing is I've cut up squares, and I have been sewing, instead of like keeping on sewing on the same thing, I've been just putting one of these under the machine when I'm working on other projects and sewing on either side of the diagonal, and that is ultimately going to give me 2 half square triangle blocks. So I just have a whole batch of squares that I've cut up sitting next to me whenever I'm sewing a project. And when I'm finishing a row, finishing a line of stitches, I will stick one of these underneath, and I am gradually, over the time of working on other projects, getting these half square triangles made, and I'm sewing them into blocks here. So one of these days I'm going to magically have a quilt done from this. So tonight, you know, these build up. So I actually have a stack of squares that I have stitched on either side of the diagonal, and we kind of need to process those now. So I'm going to, we'll cut them, and then we'll press them and start trimming them down so we can start sewing them together and working on this quilt. I have everything in my basket here. This is what's next to me by my sewing machine, and it was just full of these. It's time to empty it out. Really, it's almost time to cut more fabric. I don't have a whole lot left here. But that is the plan for tonight, you guys. Moving a little further ahead on this. So thank you guys again for joining me. Let me know how your Friday was. I will start scrolling through the comments and reading what you guys have to say. Okay, again, here's my basket. What I'm doing with it, I actually have it. I have this little thing, just this clamp sitting here. You do what works. So I have my basket. It sits right on there, and whenever I'm finishing a row of stitches on my machine, I just grab the pieces, 2 pieces from there, and it's always right next to me there. So that's where it's gonna stay right now. Let me show you my other squares that I have here. We're also going to play with some other little tools. I didn't put them in the description, but I'll try and do that later. So hello, everyone. Oh, Libby is from Indiana. Hello. Guys, so I'm on Facebook and YouTube right now live. Alyssa, do you think it is, Deborah's asking, Alyssa, do you think it's important that the fabric is cotton, or can they be blended? I mean, for this project, I'm guessing you're talking about this, I'm using whatever. I'm using recycled clothing, actually, so it's probably made out of all different stuff. I think this background might actually be a cotton flannel. This is like a shirting material. So is this, so it's, the same on both sides. This is printed, so is this. So these are probably cotton. I don't know if it's 100% cotton. And then I got, some Hawaiian shirt in there. This is definitely not cotton. I mean, it is helpful if you are using the same fabrics. They'll stretch the same, they'll be similar, but since I'm making this scrappy quilt, I'm kind of just not overly worrying about it. And if it hasn't been washed before and you're using different materials, you may want to wash it all first, but everything in here has been washed a zillion times because it is clothing, and I think this green must be an old sheet or something. I don't know. Some of these are just so old. Like, some of these have got to be like 30 years old, these shirts and stuff in here. But yeah, so I have just an old shoebox that I have here in my scraps, but I've cut up some pieces of shirt. So I've just cut out like the pockets and stuff like that. So it's just the fabric. And I've been occasionally cutting those into my squares. So I'm still using this as my light colored fabric. I have kind of a light and a dark. There's some things that are light in here, but compared to this, everything here is dark, and this is my light. And I've just been cutting these 3-inch squares. So I have like my light pile and my dark pile, which is a mix of these. Right now it's just only those because I need to cut more. But I have those just sitting by my sewing machine in that basket. Then I pick the two, put them together, and I am sewing on both sides of the diagonal, basically. So that's what's nearby. So eventually I will have to cut out more of those. But when I'm done, then I end up with these. So like here's the diagonal, and I'm just eyeballing this. It's not perfect. You could draw the lines on if you want, but I am just kind of eyeballing, a 1/4 inch from either side of the center diagonal. We're gonna actually cut these in half, and we're gonna do that tonight. And by cutting them in half, you end up with this. You end up with one over here and one over there. So these were one of those squares. We're going to trim them down the middle, and that is going to give us 2 half square triangles. So this is called a half square triangle unit in quilt land. It's just 2 triangles together that make a square. Oftentimes there's a light side and a dark side just to give contrast to whatever you're making in a quilt. A lot of times these will be made and you'll have some squares with it, and they'll end up being stars, and you'll find this unit in a lot of different quilt blocks. And the way we're making it is we're making 2 from the square like this. So I have a few that it looks like that I've cut already. Here's a different one. So we will be cutting them all in half. So we get this unit, and then we will be pressing them. They all have to be pressed so they're a square. And then they all have to be trimmed as well. Trimmed down so they're all the same size. And then I've been sewing them into these units of 25. So there's 25 half square triangles in all of these. And whenever I build up a pile of these until I can't stand it anymore, and then we take a break and start processing them. Eventually it will be some sort of quilt. I've just been sewing just for the sake of really storing them, really, and starting a block. I just randomly kind of decided, okay, let's sew 5 by 5 squares. Eventually I will have enough of these to do something with it. Maybe I'll put a sashing in between them. Maybe I'll jam them all together. I don't know. Maybe they'll all be, maybe all the triangles will be facing the same direction, so it's all the same. Maybe they won't. That's kind of interesting too. It all can create just different looks by turning them different ways. So I have not made any decisions on that right now. I'm just content to have a magic quilt being made. And I call it the magic quilt because I'm really, first of all, I'm making it out of nothing. This is old clothing that would have been just tossed. And I'm making it while I work on other projects. I'm just slipping one of these under each row while working on another project. So I'm really liking that. Okay, I think we're gonna cut these first. So I have my little mini rotating cutting mat tonight. I kind of like doing that. I'm gonna cut them first, and then we'll just press them all in one giant batch. So I'm gonna get my cutting glove on. And I'm still gonna just eyeball it, basically. Or I'm not eyeballing it, but I'm just gonna go from corner to corner. I'm not gonna draw a line or anything like that. I actually have these triangles that we'll be able to use later to cut half square triangles. I'll show you how all that works. But first, I'm just gonna use it. It's got this nice diagonal. I'm gonna use it to cut exactly on the diagonal here. There we go. So my seam allowances are weird and awkward, but I'm not going to, that's just how it's going to be. I'm not going to worry about it. We're going to trim them all down later. So, it's so nice seeing you guys again. Let me know if you have any big plans for the weekend. We're going to just chill here, and I'm going to trim this out. So this is definitely always kind of a silly day, I think, the Finish It Friday days. Sometimes we're just, it's all about let's move those projects along that need to be moved along a little bit, And sometimes we're just playing around, and I think what did we do last month? I think didn't we do some free, oh, you know what? We've been working on finishing the koala quilt. So I think we finished the binding on the koala quilt last month. But I am so, ever since we started doing the Finish It Friday, I've been so, amazed at how just this little hour, 1 hour a month, really, really moves a project along. And especially a project that you haven't, looked at in a while. It's one of those just lingering to-dos. So just putting 1 hour in just so alleviates that feeling of having unfinished things around, even if you're not done with it yet in the hour, but just that 1 hour of moving it along. But I've been amazed at how that hour I get enough motivation to keep going with it. So sometimes after a Finish It Friday, I'll want to keep going with it. I'll get a little higher here. So I'm just stacking my bits right there. And then we'll press them next. And I have this little rotating cutting mat that's going to come in handy later once we start trimming these. We've tested 2 ways to trim these, and one way is before we press them into squares, and another way is after we press them into squares. And I think we timed it at one point, and I think ultimately they ended up being pretty close in time. But I don't know, I'll show you the 2 different rulers that I'm using. Once we get through this stack, we are going to just chill and get cutting. Oh yes, so next week, so starting Monday, we will be back working on the Splendid Sampler 2 quilt along. So every week, and we started this year, every week we're working on a different project. And that's been, ooh, look at this thread here. That's been nice because then, at least for me, I feel like I don't get fatigued working on the same project all the time. It's been nice just switching around projects. And I mean, that might make all the projects take longer, but they'll eventually get done. And it is nice just kind of switching around every week. I do kind of enjoy that. So we're working on 4 projects well, kind of three big projects, and then our embroidery of the month for penguin and fish. So the first full week of the month, we work on the granny square quilt, and that's what we were working on yesterday. This is the first full week now. So we always lose a day on the granny square quilt because it's also Finish It Friday. The first Friday of the month, we pull out one of these unfinished little guys like this that we move along. The second full week is the Splendid Sampler 2. We're about halfway done with our quilt blocks there. We've been working on that for a long time. That is a great quilt for learning all things quilting, really. I mean, it's a lot. It just has tons of different skills. So there's, let's call it opportunity to learn, and opportunity to practice lots of different things. It's a commitment for sure. You don't have to do all the blocks, but man, just how much I've learned from doing the first Splendid Sampler quilt was just awesome. And now with this second Splendid Sampler quilt, I feel like I get to practice all those skills that I learned while working my way through the first one. And I know a lot of you guys are still working on those blocks as well. So, yeah. Now, we've been working on them sporadically, and now I'm just like, let's just go down the list, the unfinished ones, and we'll figure that out. So I'd have to check that out to see what one's next on the list, but we'll see. But we didn't do it. We didn't do it last month. Our schedule was a little goofy last month, but with good reason. I'll recap that in a sec. But the third week of the month is the embroidery of the month. So every month with Penguin and Fish, I release a new embroidery of the month. It's available to everyone. It's not a subscription or anything, but it's only available that month. And the third week of the month, we stitch that up. And I have that by me. This is the pattern for this month. It's this Your Sweet pattern. There's two versions of it though. So here is like the more basic version. It's done with like chain stitches, and it's just super sweet and cute. And then this is the thread painted or the silk shading. Those are two terms that mean the same thing. The silk shaded version, and we're actually going to stitch up this little peach during the Facebook Live in week 3. It does. It takes some time to do the thread painting, the silk shading. It is done with one strand of floss. There's a little strawberry dude. But we'll be stitching this. So if you ever wanted to know how to do silk shading, thread painting, needle painting, those are all kind of the same thing. I'll be demoing that for the week 3 bit. So stay tuned for that. I'm pretty excited about that. I learned a ton about it, some tips and tricks and stuff while I was stitching that up. And the pattern has detailed photos and instructions on how to do it too. But I'll be doing it live, so you guys can ask questions and stuff then. I promise you can do it. It looks super scary, but it's completely doable for sure. And I have some troubleshooting tips too for it that are kind of fun. So it's a more advanced way than what we've been embroidering so far. But again, I promise you, it's easier than you think, and it's so rewarding. It's so fun to see all those colors blending together. It really is neat. And then the last week of the month, we work on the Aurifil block of the month. Aurifil is that thread company. They're from Italy, and they are doing an Italy-themed quilt that is 12 blocks, one for each month, and a different designer designs it each month. And I actually got to be one of the designers for that project. So I was July's designer. So that's why last month we rearranged a little bit, because the block, it comes out the 15th of the month, the new block, and I wanted to start it right away. And that's usually when we do the embroidery of the month. So we kind of flipped some weeks around. But now we're back to normal. Oh, Lynn says she's looking forward to the embroidery project. I think it really is going to be fun. And I have gotten requests before on how do you do the thread painting, how do you do the silk shading. Those are just two similar terms. They mean the same thing. And it's going to be fun. Ooh, Angela says that she just finished a Storm at Sea quilt. Ooh, giving myself permission to start the granny square quilt. I think you'll be very happy that you did. Once you get past the cutting, there is a lot of strip cutting in that granny square quilt. It took me hours, which I'm sure you'll see if you watch or just page through my videos, my live videos on it. I do all of this live, so you can see the entire process of all these quilts, even the ones that take, more than a year. All the videos are there. But yeah, there's lots and lots and lots of weeks. I think that all we did was cutting strips. So, can page through those pretty quickly. But after that, the sewing part of it is just, it's rewarding every time I work on one of those blocks. Even though they're all the same, just the combos from randomly putting those strips together is so fun. I'm excited to work on the border, because the border kind of mimics the granny squares a little bit, but they're skinnier, but it looks like a huge patchworky border that looks just fancy. And I've never done, I was thinking through this, and I don't think I've actually done an intricate border, or a seemingly intricate border for a quilt before. I kind of get to the point where I'm like, let's just put a binding on this and be done. To me, a border is like that step that you forget you have to do, so I think that's why I haven't done anything really intricate yet, so I'm extra excited to get to there. And we'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, if you are just starting any of these projects now and you feel like you're behind, like I said, I'm only working on each of them 1 week a month. So there is oodles of time to catch up for sure. So all of these that we're working on now, you can still do it. So the Aurifil block is free. So you could, do that for nothing with like scraps of fabric that you already have. And then there's patterns available for the embroidery of the month, and a bundle too with all the supplies. And then there's the pattern for the granny square quilt, and then the Splendid Sampler 2 is a book with a lot of patterns, and then we're going through all of those. So that's the long version of letting you know how we do things here again. Our current projects. All right, we're almost done with this stack, you guys. So this is how many blocks we made just from, sticking these on at the end of sewing something else. So again, I only make these squares. I only sew these lines when I'm working on a completely other project, and I want to take whatever I'm sewing off the machine. Instead of just pulling it off and snipping the threads, I sew on one of these instead, and then just snip it off of the end of one of these. So I am magically, while I'm working on other projects, sewing blocks together. So that's, again, why I kind of call this the magic quilt. I'm sewing something from nothing. Here we got more little threads around. They're annoying me. Get rid of some of those. But every once in a while, we do have to work on this quilt, so it's not completely magical. I still do have to do what we're doing tonight, but this seemed like a chill Finish It Friday thing. Moving everything forward a little bit. So you see me kind of every once in a while flipping these around to the white side. That is basically because I can see the stitches a little bit better. Not that that matters, I just really need the 2 points to cut a diagonal, but it's kind of handy seeing the stitches too. This one I didn't, I just wanted to try doing it without. We're down to that weird Hawaiian shirt again. I'm positive that this is not a cotton shirt, the Hawaiian shirt. So I am mixing fabrics, and it's noticeable. Like, they're weird to sew together. Like, one's a little flowier and stretchier than the cotton. But again, I'm guess I don't care. This is definitely scrappy. I mean, look at this line. My sewing machine clearly was not working correctly, but I still tried to sew. So I was probably testing the machine, but man, that looks crazy. But I'm still going to use it. It's still 2 pieces sewn together. It will work. I think the scrappier the better with this quilt. This would be like a good grandpa quilt or something. Like this, maybe like a wheelchair quilt. It'd be good for that. Like, that'd be a good size too to make a quilt. All right, so that's it, you guys. I trimmed all the ones I have done. So now we just have a pile of these triangles. So here were the 2 ways that I was doing this. And first, I want to make sure. I think I'm ending up with 2.5-inch squares. Let's just measure this quick. All right, so this is, yeah, okay, so this is approximately a 2-inch square, meaning we're ending up with a 2.5-inch square. A 2-inch square finished, meaning when it's sewn in the quilt, it's called finished. When it's unfinished, that's when it's like before it's sewn into the quilt. Like this, after it's been trimmed and we're kind of complete with it, that's still called unfinished. The unfinished size is 2.5 inches because we're going to lose a quarter here and lose a quarter here all the way around. So we'll end up with them 2. So we need to cut them to 2.5, if that makes sense. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. Oh, Dawn, I love lap quilts too. I think that's kind of my favorite thing. I actually like I actually kind of like twin size quilts because John's super tall. So lap size quilts aren't really long enough for him, but a twin size quilt just thrown on the couch, like that's perfect. So like large lap size quilts, I do kind of like that. Oh, why am I separating the half square triangles? So they're not technically half square triangles yet, Deborah. So right now, at this point, they're just 2 squares sewn together. Once I cut them apart, now I have half square triangles. So now this is the half square triangle, is where the 2 triangles make the square. I'm actually getting 2 out of each thing that I sew together. So I get 2 half square triangles out of the 1. So I don't have those until I cut them. Like this sewn together is just like I have a half square triangle over here and a half square triangle over here, but I can't do anything with them till they're cut apart. So it's at this point that they're a half square triangle. So right now it's just 2 triangles. Or just 2 squares sewn down the center. All right, so I need this one. So this is kind of a neat device. I haven't actually used it in a while, but what you do is, in theory, I mean, this works better with quilting weight fabric because all my fabric is weird and stretchy, so I probably won't use this technique tonight. I'll probably press these open. But this is a technique to get that 2.5-inch square where I can cut it while it's still in triangle form. Because usually you have to press it open first, and then you trim this out to the right size, but this way I trim it beforehand, so I'm actually cutting less, which should make this go faster. However, my squares are so wonky and my fabric's a little wonky, this might not actually work out the best. But this is called a Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmers. And what you do is first you find the size that you want to end up with. I want a 2.5 inch square. So here's the finished size. So the finished size is 2 inches. Remember, finish means once it's sewn into the quilt. So we want it 2 inches once it's sewn into the quilt. But while it's not sewn into the quilt yet, while it's just hanging out, we want it to be 2.5 inches. So what we do is there's this dotted line here with this gray area. That represents our seam allowance. So if I go like this, I put that dotted line on my seam, so on that stitched line. I'm going to put my cutting glove on again. So really anywhere on that stitched line. And there's little slots here. I am going to cut into those slots. And that will kind of get rid of the dog ears. I'll show you what that is in a sec. But now we are going to just trim. Ooh, I did that really weird. I did that kind of opposite direction of what I normally cut, but it kind of worked. So I'm just trimming along the edge here. We can shimmy all that away. Even these little dog ears. There we go. And now, in theory, when I press this open, we will have our perfect 2.5 inch square here. So that is what's so nifty about this. I can cut it perfectly before I press it open. Now again, my fabric is pretty stretchy, so I feel like when I do press this, I might get it wonky, so it won't be that perfect 2.5 inch square anymore. I don't think that'll happen as much if you're using just all the same quilting weight fabric. But we'll press that open. Let's do one more so I can show you guys that again. So I want 2.5 inch squares, so I'm going to the 2.5. We're just going to line the dotted line up with my sewing line. I'll show you what happens if you don't do those dog ears, like what happens if I just trim it. Oh, cool. So Sue says she just bought this trimmer and haven't used it yet. Well, that's great. It is awesome because instead of cutting, a square has 4 sides. Instead of having to cut 4 sides, I only have to cut these 2, which makes it so nice. However, again, I do think it is going to distort a little bit when I press. So I didn't cut those points off. So because I didn't cut them off, when I press this open, let's just finger press it here, I'm going to have these little like flared little bits here. In Quiltland, they call them dog ears. I'm going to have these dog ears here. So that's why they have like these slits cut into here. That is to get rid of the dog ears while we're cutting the rest of it all out, which is kind of cool. So let's just get that glove on again. I feel safer wearing the glove. Get that dog ear, get this dog ear. There. And that is that. So that's how you use the, again, they're called the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmers. I got these 2 in a pack, and this Trimmer A does, here so you guys can see, Trimmer A does all the like half sizes. So the 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5 inch squares. Whereas this Trimmer B does just the full inch size. So there's 2 different sizes here. They're just a hair different. And these came in the same set that I got. And here you can see the little instructions there. Place on dashed line of desired cut size on seam of unpressed half square triangle. So that's what we did. This is our unpressed. Pressed would be that is now a square. Pressed would be like this. Unpressed is just while it's still a triangle. But yeah, so that is the clearly perfect slotted trimmer. The other one that I'm going to use tonight is the block lock ruler. Now this has a little groove in it. There you can kind of see it, and I'll show you how that works in a sec here. Let's press these open. I need to press this needs them pressed open, or pressed into that square before we use them. So I want to do it this way, I think. So I'm going to do that with a few, and then we can check it out. I'll do it with like 2, like what we did this with these. Okay. Let's get the pressing mat out here. Oh, so Catherine's asking, do I still have the one I glued? So yes, so this was such an interesting thing that we did. So when I got these in the mail, they came broken, and I don't even know if I can find it anymore. Let me see if I can run my finger across. I'm not even sure which one it is. One of these came broken, like the tip was broken off of it. Where was it broken? Oh my gosh, I can't even see. And we repaired it with acrylic nail glue, like for your nails, like to glue acrylic nails. Oh, right here. Oh my gosh, it's bigger than I thought. Okay, so if you look really closely, there it is. Like there's a seam going right through there. That is where, maybe you can see a little better here because it's kind of a little dirtier. There is right through there, it came broken, which was a huge bummer, right? So I did some research on how to fix, it is fully solid, like that's not going to break. Acrylic nail glue, I put a dab on there and stuck it back together. It's perfect. It's crazy perfect. So if you've ever broken one of your acrylic rulers, just some acrylic nail glue, just from like Target or whatever, a tiny dab. You got to be careful with it because it's strong. But yeah, this is an acrylic ruler, and man, it's like magic. So that worked so much better than expected. My edges still pretty perfect there, but yeah, phew, I couldn't even find it there for a while. So the repair is beautiful. All right, so here are our pieces. I suspect I pressed to the dark side. Yes, okay. That's, I think, typical for a half square triangle. So I'm going to have the dark side on top. I'm just going to give it a little press like this. And then I'm going to flip the top open but leave the seam allowance. So the seam allowance will end up on the dark side. Give it a little press. So again, my fabric is pretty weird and wonky, and they're different than each other, so it is stretching a little bit. So again, we don't have our perfect 2.5-inch square anymore. It's kind of bloopy on the top. But for what I'm doing, these are pretty dang wonky. So a little weird stretch and whatever in this, I'm not going to care. So I'm not overly worried that these are not perfect. But there, so that's how we now have our half square triangle units. We got 2 out of each of those ones that we sewed. These can be put together and, you can make all sorts of shapes and stuff out of them, which is kind of cool. They're really versatile. But yeah, so that is the first way of doing that with the slotted trimmers. The block lock ruler, we do need to press it first. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, I think Arlo's asking, would Best Press help hold the shape? So Best Press is a brand of starch. So you could spray these. I'm sure you could spray these and they'd probably stay a little. They wouldn't wiggle so much and they'd be a little bit nicer. But again, I don't think it's worth it for this little weird project that I'm doing. I haven't used starch actually in a while just because it it kind of put burn marks in my, when I used it with my old ironing board. Wow, these are pretty wonky. This Hawaiian shirt is crazy wonky. I don't know. It is helpful on triangle shapes though, starch, so I'm sure it probably would help. I think it'd actually be more helpful doing this block lock way because I would put it on now maybe. Anyway, look at that crazy one. So I'm going to just press open a few of them, and then we'll try the block lock ruler, and then we can decide really what we want to do for more. You know, even if I get all these pressed today, that would be a win. An hour here, an hour there, moving things forward. That's the plan. Okay, so how the block lock ruler works, and that's the block lock ruler is going to be really helpful on this spinning mat. I'm going to get my glove on right away too. Okay, so we pressed it to one side, right? We pressed it to the darker side. By it, I mean the seam allowance. We pressed the seam allowance to the darker side, and what that's done is it's made right here. We have a layer of 3 pieces of fabric. We have the front, and then we have both seam allowances. Versus this side, on the white side, we don't have any seam allowance, so we just have the one piece of fabric. So it's bulkier on this side, meaning it's raised up a little bit on this side because there's more fabric. That's where the block lock, this slot comes in. So because of that extra kind of bump we have there from the layers of fabric, it's kind of like our add a quarter ruler. Like this slot, you can bump up right against that bump, the extra level, and you can actually slide this back and forth on that ledge. Like I can't actually move it. If I'm pressing down, I can't move it that way anymore, which is kind of cool. I can move it this way because that's the lower side. So you actually don't need a block lock ruler the size that you need to cut. I know a lot of people that just have a larger block lock, and I kind of wish I would have known that before I got this. I purchased like a set of 3 because I thought they needed to be the same size, but they actually don't. So what we're going to do is, I think I do it on that side, or maybe this side does like the different size. Oh no, so that makes sense. It's on the diagonal there. Yeah, so the ruler should be sliding evenly there. So I just kind of line it up to the edge there so I can trim off this edge. So holding it there, do that edge, and I can just kind of hold it, do that edge. There we go. And now we can slide it up. There's the ruler markings on here. We can slide it up until I've hit the 2.5 inch line, because we want 2.5 inch squares. So here's inch 1, inch 2, and then there's my 1/2 inch mark. Lining it up here. And now we revealed like our other edge there. So I can just trim that. So I think this method is going to get us far more accurate blocks or squares because we're pressing it open first. So all the distortion from pressing it, we're cutting that off now. So here we go. That is our 2.5 inch block there. So let's try another one. Again, we've always pressed to the dark on these, so I know that that's the side with the bulky bit. So we just need to wedge our block lock in there. Now you want to make sure that you're not cutting off too much. You still need to have at least that 2.5 inches, right? So you can actually see, here's my 2.5 inch mark and 2.5 inch mark. I want to make sure I'm at least in that zone before I cut. All right, let's do both sides. First side. And here with the rotating cutting mat, it is nice to just get everything in position so it's easier easier for your hand to cut. Then we can just rotate all the way around, slide it down, get in line with the 2.5 inch mark. There we go. Another one. You know what? That's actually pretty quick. I don't know which one I like better. I do like how accurate this is. That's the difference. I think that's kind of the winning point of this. You do have to cut 4 sides, which is annoying, where you only have to cut 2 from the other. But we are still cutting the dog ears off, so it is still 4 motions with the slotted trimmer. I do like the magic of this, that you cut it beforehand and then it's ready to go when you press it open, but I do think that this is more accurate because we're not having that distortion anymore. Like, look at this one, for example. This one is so wonky. You can see it here. It's so goofy from pressing it, where we're going to fix that right now, whereas with the slotted trimmer, I don't know if it would. Wow, this was sewn really poorly too. But that's how a lot of these were. Ooh, do I even have 2.5 inches here? Ugh, just barely. So you can see I'm kind of starting to go off the edge right here, but I'm just barely on the 2.5 inch line. So, this is a stretch, this one. But again, with this quilt where it's not the most super accurate thing in the world, it's very patchworky, it doesn't matter so much. I think we'll get it in the seam allowance. Yeah, this one's pretty jacked, but that's okay. Oh my god. It's barely 2.5 inches. I think it's actually quite a bit less. Yeah, like look here, I didn't quite have enough fabric there, but you know, if I sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, that will be in the quilt enough. Good enough. That's what that is. All right, checking through some of your comments. I know I've been a little off of the comments tonight. What size would you have gotten then, since you don't need them the size you want? So Jolyn, half square triangles, I am not great at triangle math. There is a whole world. You can just actually Google, like, quilting, what size to make the triangle, half square triangles, something like that, because when you are starting with just the 2 squares together, it is hard to know if you like move a 1/4 inch this way and then press it open. It is going to be smaller than your original 3 inch square. It is going to be closer to that 2.5 inches. It'll just be a little bit bigger. It's actually the math is in like 1/16 of an inches and stuff. So there is actual accurate math charts out there to do the half square triangles. I just randomly chose 3 inches. I don't know why. And when I made my first half square triangle, I'm like, that's close to 2.5 inches. So I then trimmed it to 2.5 inches. I didn't do any thinking beyond that. So I'm sure if I wanted to not have to trim and that they were all just perfect from the get-go, I would have maybe done some of that math. But that didn't happen. I don't think I'm, this is all the waste I have so far from those, all these blocks that I just did. So starting at the 3 inches and ending up with 2.5 inch blocks. So I think I did okay. All right, so I'm going to just, close enough is near enough. The nice thing with the half square triangles is you can just cut them down to whatever size you need. I could cut this to a 1 inch square if I wanted to, right? If I lost my ruler already. Yeah, so if I trim the one side and then go, so I have just like a 1 inch square. So, no matter how big I make it, I can make it out however small. And there was no rhyme or reason for this quilt. So whatever size it ends up is what it's going to end up. I didn't figure that all beforehand and do the math on that. Oh yeah, there's so many different ways to do half square triangles. they're all a little magical too. It's always exciting that whatever method you do actually yields half square triangles. It's kind of neat. You can take a square, sew along all the edges of a square, then chop it on the both diagonals, and you'll have 4 half square triangles. It's just really fun. And there's different reasons to do it different ways too, but I'm just doing it I just made these in an easy way that was easy for me to just sew after I sew other things on my sewing machine, so I can use them as leaders and enders. Some little Hawaiian one there. Kate is asking, do I mark the squares and all the light pieces first? That would be the smart thing to do. I have not. As you can see, some of my sewing is super wonky. Like, look how far away I am from here, this is a great example of super wonky sewing. So look how close I am to the diagonal here compared to down here. I have been very much not doing precision on these. So no, all I'm doing is kind of visualizing the diagonal and pretending that I'm a 1/4 inch away from that when I sew. And obviously, based on that one there, I'm not very accurate, but I know I'm going to be close enough with this 3 inches that I'll be able to get the 2 inches afterwards. I mean, look, this square wasn't even cut all the way. I am relying on the trimming of these. Obviously. Look at that one. That one's crazy. But yeah, so ideally, yes, you would draw a line on the diagonal of the light colored piece, and then while you're sewing, you would sew a 1/4 inch away from that diagonal, and then you'd flip it around and sew a 1/4 inch from the diagonal on the other way. It is far easier to do when you've drawn a line on the fabric. It was just an extra step that I didn't want to do. So I'm erring on the side of wonky, inaccurate seams versus the extra step of drawing the line. But yes, drawing the line would be a great idea. Kate, I am starting out with 3-inch squares. So I can show you guys that again. So I start out with, in my little basket here, look how pretty it is now. Now that I don't have all this stuff in here. I have a stack of light colors and I have a stack of dark colors. So whenever I'm sewing, I take, I can even show you guys, I can do one right now. These are 3-inch squares. So I have one on the machine already, and every time, let's say this is a whole nother project that I'm sewing, like we were last night, this is the granny square quilt or whatever, but I want to take this off the machine and I want to do it in a way where I don't have to have the long strings. So instead, I grab 2 of my pieces of fabric here. In theory, you could do it on the light colored side. It doesn't matter. And to get this off the machine, I'm going to sew another piece on. So again, what people usually do is they have just a scrap piece of fabric that they just keep using over and over and over again. Instead of doing that, I am making something out of sewing over and over and over again. So again, here's where you would want that diagonal line. I'm literally just imagining, I'm just guessing on from here to there. So I'm just kind of aiming. Oop, I gotta take my little piece of fabric out here. There we go. So I'm pretending I have a line, and I'm sewing a 1/4 inch away from that line. So I'm kind of visualizing that this is my line. There we go. And then I am able to take whatever project I was working off of the machine, because I just have this little bit of thread now. And then this will just stay here till I sew something else. But there, so I can show you on this one, I have the 1 seam Now I'm going to rotate it around, and I'm going to sew on the other side of the diagonal. So again, I'm imagining that diagonal. Again, draw the diagonal on would be a lot easier than what I'm doing. I'm just guessing. And just so we can take that one off, I'll sew this one as well. Okay. And then we have, it's our two squares with two seams on it. And really on each side of those, we're going to get a half square triangle. But we got to cut it apart first. So that's what I was cutting with the rotary cutter. Let's see if I can cut it with my little scissors here. Again, this is how not accurate I care about this quilt. There. So pretend I rotary cut it on the diagonal. Now we got two. And that's where we're at. That's the stage we're at now. That now we have two half square triangles from those two 3-inch squares. But now they're smaller, right? This isn't 3 inches anymore. This is a little over 2.5 inches. It's probably like, 2 5/8 inches or something crazy like that. But yeah, so this is not what we're now pressing and trimming down to our 2-inch squares here. And then this is what we'll sew into our quilt blocks. But yeah, so that's the process. I just have, like I said, literally this bucket of them right next to me, so I can just grab them when I'm working on other projects. I just have to refill that bucket with new 3-inch squares every once in a while. But yeah, I call it the magical quilt because I'm making these out of doing nothing, right? I'm just, instead of sewing that, the little bitty bits like that, I'm sewing this instead. It's magic. A quilt being made while I work on something else. That's pretty neat. Right, here's the ones that we just made. So we'll work on this a little bit more. I know it's already like 9:30 already. I kind of want to press these a little bit longer. I'll stay on for like 5 more minutes here. See how many we can make. All these little steps take forever, and I find all this annoying doing these bits. But eventually we'll be able to trim these. And each step takes its time. So here's all our little triangles that we cut. All of these have to be pressed, and then all of these have to be trimmed. And then I can start sewing them into my blocks. And eventually all my blocks I will sew together into a quilt. And I'm putting these together pretty randomly as well. They're all pointed the same direction, they're all lined up the same direction, but the way I'm arranging them has been random, which I like. It's a super duper scrappy quilt out of actual scraps, and I kind of find that fun. So we'll get through this pile a little bit more, I think, tonight, because it'd be nice to feel like I got a little bit more done with this. I did get them cut up, though. That's nice. I'm gonna have to find a place to store these, though, because I don't want to put them back in my basket. And my basket's getting low on fabric, so I'm gonna have to cut more 3-inch squares soon. You could do this with bigger pieces too. This would be great if you had like a bunch of like little charm packs, those pre-cut squares just hanging out and you didn't know what to do with them. I would just cut a bunch of white squares and then take all of your other squares that you have, all different colors, and then have it be a white on one side and your other one on the other side. And I think that with anything would be really pretty. So this iron stays hot for a long time. I can probably do a lot of these before I have to reheat the iron, and it'll reheat in like 2 seconds. But this is that cordless iron, which is the best freaking thing ever. I'm gonna see if I can get these in the shop, because this combo here, my cordless iron and my pressing mat here, two of my most favorite things that I've gotten for quilt land related stuff. I mean, once you don't have that cord, you wonder why the heck we've had a cord all these years. This is so much nicer. Kate says that it's relaxing watching me press. Well, that's nice. That's the thing. This is that one step. This and cutting, oh, I tell you, that I just always forget is part of the process. So it kind of stresses me out a little bit, actually. I've been trying to sit into it a little bit more. Like, I've been trying to acknowledge that this is part of the process. And that it is, in fact, relaxing. Actually, right now, it is pretty muggy outside. We're supposed to get hot weather again the next few days, tomorrow and Sunday, and the humidity's coming back, and I'm telling you, standing over this hot iron, I think I'm starting to sweat through my shirt a little bit, actually. Ugh. Yep, Nolene, I am trying to stay inside as much as I can. Not do things either. I'm glad I don't have kids right now to have to make the decision of them going back to school or not. That just sounds so stressful. Oh, funny. So Kate says I was going to cut fabric for a project like this. So funny to find this on. Oh, yeah. That's awesome. I mean, it really, I love, like I said, all these little magic things. I love that I feel like I'm making something out of nothing here. Again, I'm using recycled fabric. These are all old shirts, old blankets, or whatever. I don't even know. They've been in bins in the basement because I've been saving them for some reason, and it goes such a long way, though. I mean, I have that, what I showed at the beginning, I have that shoebox filled with just, I don't know, maybe 7 different shirts that I cut, all the buttons and the pockets off of. And just those shirts have been lasting forever. I'm gonna, 6 freaking old shirts are gonna make like a whole quilt. It's kind of crazy town. But just exciting. They're getting a new life, and the other thing is it's happening while I work on other quilts, just using them as the leaders and enders. I'm going to always do that, like when I finish this or whatever. And it doesn't have to be half square triangles. You could do like a log cabin block, or just sewing squares together. It doesn't matter. It's about just have it cut up and have it near you, and sew a seam on while you're trying to take something else off the machine, and then it can just sit there. This quilt gets done when it gets done, but it gets done magically, and that's what's exciting. Oh my god, there's so many of these yet. I'm sitting in it. I'm gonna sit in it a little bit more. It was fun to cut a few today, though, but man, we weren't even going to get past the ironing stage tonight, were we? Totally. Crafts for Others says all that small fabric adds up. I know, isn't that crazy? Every single time when I go into my stash, which is just, I have a bunch of those plastic Sterilite bins, and I don't know, tons of them in the basement, and I have fabric in those. And every single time I'm like, oh, I'm going to make a quilt out of this bin of fabric or whatever, you barely scrape the surface. It doesn't even look like you took anything out of it, and you got a whole quilt. And it's the heck, that didn't use up any fabric. So it's just so silly. One of these days, though, I'll have to buy a whole room full of new fabric, because all my stash will be away. said no one ever, I suppose. Kate says, I like the process more than completing it. I'm with you. I mean, that took me a while to feel that way, though. It took me actually a long time to start quilting. My mom had been quilting for a while, and I took a class at the place where she learned, and it was fun and everything, but they take so long, and that's why I like embroidery. At least the simple embroidery that we do, like with penguin and fish stuff. It's all relatively simple, and I can finish it in like a sitting or two, right? Just like a couple hours and it's done, and that's rewarding. With quilts, every little bit of it takes some time. So I've had to learn to like the process, and I definitely do now, especially now that I'm doing these lives every night, these streaming live every night here. I know, like my brain knows that I'm going to get an hour of work time in. So if I started this and I didn't know, like, oh my gosh, when am I going to be able to work on that again? And it's been months since I've worked on it or whatever, I think that would be a little bit more stressful for me. But I know that every night at this time, I'll have a little bit of time, a little hour to work on something. So that helps me, I think, enjoy the process of it. Just gets a little step further and a little step further and a little step further. And that's nice. You guys, there are just still so many of these. I think we might actually call it a night here. So, geez, it just, there's so many. So this is how many we kind of have pressed. I mean, we got to play with those tools and stuff too. These are the ones that we actually have cut. And then we have oodles of triangles yet here to press. So I don't know, maybe I'll play around with that this weekend a little bit more. Like I said, every time I do one of these Finish It Fridays, it gets me pumped to just keep going on, a project I haven't worked on in a while. And again, just so you guys can see again what the whole idea is, or what the finished sort of deal is, I have actually 9 of these blocks done. So, I'm just going to keep adding to them, and whenever it's a size that feels good, I will sew them together in some way, and we will have a quilt. But all of this is just from working on those other little projects. It's a magic quilt. It literally is a something out of nothing quilt, and I think this is going to be like, like I said, I think this would be great for like a grandpa. I think this will be like a nice like wheelchair quilt, a good size and everything. I wouldn't have to make it like this, but it does feel like a nice like man den, man cave quilt a little bit. I like it though, it's fun. All right, I'm going to flip you around. We'll call it an evening here. All right, so thanks again for hanging out with me as I press and cut. Here's what one of those blocks looks like. I think it's about, if I remember right, it's about 8 inches by, well, no, it'd be 10 inches. They're 2-inch blocks. So this is about 10 inches by 10 inches. 10 and a half right now. When it's sewn in the quilt, it'll be 10 inches, roughly. Like I said, this is pretty not accuracy involved quilt. It's so soft though, because it's all those clothes that have been washed a trillion times. But it still works. It still works as fabric. So thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a fabulous weekend. Next week we'll be doing the Splendid Sampler 2, and then back to our embroidery of the month. There are bundles for these still available, so if you order it next week, you'll most likely have it in time to start stitching with us. We'll be doing that little peach from it. I'm really excited. That's going to be fun. So thanks again. Have a fabulous weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Good night.